Okay, hi everyone. You can open the link to the slides that Teresa just posted in the chat. And like she said, we're looking at section 7. So this is the 5th session of the conversation series, and we're going to talk about digital object and finding aid features in the AtoM platform and how you might want to use them in Archeion. And just to clarify right at the start, the digital object feature is separate from the finding aid feature, which we'll discuss a little bit. So we want to make sure we know that uploading and linking digital objects to your descriptions in Archeion, that's a separate workflow, separate process than uploading or generating finding aids in AtoM or Archeion. So we're going to discuss these two topics, and like the other session so far, how you use these two functionalities in AtoM is going to depend on how your institution might use Archeion for your specific context. So like the other sessions, we're going to skip over all the introductory slides. So again, we're assuming you know what Archeion is, but all the intro stuff is in the slide deck above section 7 if you want to look at those later. And I'll skip over my full introduction because I see most names are familiar. But if we haven't met, my name's Kelly and I'm the Archeion Coordinator. I've been in this role since 2023. And I work part-time, lunches, evenings, weekends, supporting AAO members with the Archeion service. And Archeion uses a platform called AtoM. So hopefully everyone has that base knowledge. And if you don't, just raise your hand, yell at me. I don't understand, put something in the chat and we can pause and there'll be a discussion time at the end. So we're back in the main slide deck this week. We're starting on section 7, and section 7 covers how to add digital objects to your archival descriptions in Archeion. It also covers physical storage, but I've removed those slides from what I'm presenting today, so we won't discuss Archeion's physical storage features. And we're also including the slides from section 5 at the end of section 5 around finding aids. And that's from the description section. So we're going to go section 7, digital objects, and then section 5, the last portion around finding aids. And as always, the official documentation for all of the functionality that I'm discussing is on the official AtoM documentation, and I don't repeat any of the slides or instructions that is in their documentation because their documentation is really great. So all of that is linked in the slides as well. So you should refer to that as sort of like an assister in this slide deck. Okay, so first, let's talk about context. So how you use the digital object and finding aid features in Archeion depends on how your institution uses Archeion. So there's 4 sort of contexts for how you might use it. So first, if you use it in a very basic way, just to maintain an institutional profile, you can actually access the digital object or finding aid functionality in AtoM. Because AtoM requires you to have descriptions to tie and connect any digital object you link or finding aid. So you can't actually upload any digitized records or finding aids. However, you can use the finding aids, guides, and publications fields in your institutional profile and link out to your institution's digital collections discovery system. So in the slide notes, I've linked to an example for the City of Ottawa profile where they've linked out to their digital collections database. And we discussed this in the first conversation series around institutional profiles. And then the next context is if you're an institution who has an institutional profile and also adds authority records, but you don't contribute descriptions. So we talked about this last week when we talked about the Ontario Archival Accessions Register, where you can choose to just upload an authority record and have a name access point. So technically in AtoM, it's possible to upload and connect an authority record to a digital object. And in the slide notes, I've linked to an example in the AtoM demo site, so not Archeion. But in the AtoM demo site, you can see that some authority records do have a digital object tied to them, and they looked really great. They look really visual. But these digital objects, these images that are tied to the authority records, these do not surface in the digital objects browse page in AtoM or Archeion. So in a discovery context, they look great, but they can't be searched. So if you look at the AtoM demo site for the example that is linked, and I can show it later as well, you'll see that the authority record has the digital image, but then the digital image is also tied to the description. And that's because you can't actually search or surface the digital object tied to the authority record in the digital objects browse page. It has to be tied to the description. So it kind of duplicates the digital object storage and isn't really something I recommend, especially if you're short on time. it takes a bit of time to upload the digital object to the authority, but it doesn't actually have really any discovery benefit. It just has like a nice visual to the authority record. So I wouldn't recommend uploading digital objects for authority records. So that's the second context. The third context is if you only add top level descriptions in Archeion. So this is something that I'm going to focus on a bit today, because you can use this method of adding digital objects as a single digital object in your top level description as a way to surface that phone or that collection has digitized records related to it. And we'll talk about this a bit more as the session goes on. And I've linked to an example in the slide notes for how that works. Let me see. And then finally, the fourth context is if your institution uses Archeion as your sole description database, then you can sort of make the full use of the digital object and finding aid features in AtoM. Just keeping in mind that you have to add a corresponding description per digital object. It's a one-to-one relationship in the database, though I've seen some creative ways that people get around the one-to-one relationship, which we'll also talk about. So the other thing to note is if you're how you use the digital object feature in AtoM. If you're uploading digital objects instead of linking out to externally hosted digital objects, then you just have to be mindful about storage, because in Archeion, we all share the system storage. And there's a policy around that we'll cover. And in the slide notes, I've linked to an institution who does use Archeion as its repository to upload digital objects, which is the city of Greater Sudbury. So you can check them out. So those are all the different contexts of how this might work. So just keep in mind how you're using Archeion as we're talking about these things. So let's start with the last context, the last example. So say your institution uses Archeion as your description database, as the Guelph Public Library does, and you want to be uploading and adding digitized records to the descriptions that you're adding to Archeion. So these next steps assume that you already have descriptions in Archeion. So when you go to any record, AtoM allows you to link digital objects to any description at any level, and the digital object will be publicly displayed for anyone as long as the description itself is published and publicly viewable. So again, it's important to remember it's that one-to-one relationship, and this means you can add one digital object to a phone or collection description, and if you want to add more at the series, file, or item levels, then you have to add those lower level descriptions so you can connect the digital objects. You can also upload multiple digital objects and descriptions at the same time, and I've linked to the instructions, but most folks right now in Archeion, they do it manually. So this is kind of describing the second use case where you don't have to add all the lower level descriptions into Archeion. During the accessions register session, we were talking about, if you have your own local database, you don't necessarily want to duplicate all that item level metadata in Archeion. What you can do is have a top level description and then an image connected to that description, and then an availability of other formats field that links out to the full database with all the other digitized records. And this is a great way to sort of surface the description as having digitized records and then link out to a local database that has the full description in it. And that just saves time in replicating the digital objects if you have them somewhere else. And what that does is it surfaces that description in the Browse Digital Objects page. So a lot of users, they're coming to Archeion, they're going to be attracted to that link to Browse Digital Objects. And if you're not adding the digital object to that description, then you don't get the benefit of surfacing in the Digital Objects Browse page. So adding a single digital object to a top level collection and then linking out in the availability of other formats field to an external digital collection can be a successful way to lead users to your external digital collections without requiring a lot of labor in editing or adding anything to Archeion. And once again, my dog is whining again, and I'm sorry if you guys are hearing her in the background. You can also add different formats of digital objects into Archeion, so images, audio, and if you have multiple child descriptions, each with digital objects, what happens at the top level is these display in this kind of carousel fashion. So this is just showing On the top one is the city of Greater Sudbury, which has multiple child level records, and then the bottom one is just the phone level with one digital object. So before you link any digital object in Archeion, obviously you have to ensure that your institution has cleared all rights. So copyright, privacy related to the digital object. We do have a public letter of agreement for Archeion that's on the website. And it states that your institutions are solely responsible for clearing any rights issues before you post the material publicly in Archeion. And in the slide notes, one of my colleagues at U of T shared this really great resource for copyright considerations from our digital world. And you can refer to that if you're ever wondering about copyright. And we have the copyright session coming up with Jean Dryden as well in December, I think. Okay, so that's all the context of uploading and how you would upload. So when you're ready to add a digital object to a description, what you actually do, and this does replicate the steps from the official AtoM documentation. Their steps might be a bit more clear, so you can use their documentation as well. But to walk you through it, what you do is you go to that description, you click on the More button, and then you select Link Digital Object. My impulse is always import digital objects. The import digital objects is batch importing digital objects as descriptions as well. Don't click that. It's not import digital objects, it's link digital objects. So just remember that if you get confused between link and import, the one that you want to add a single digital object to a description is link digital object. And then on the link digital object screen, you'll see two options. So the system doesn't indicate visually to you as an end user that this is an either or option. So you don't need to do both of these things. You don't need to upload a file and link. You need to choose either or. So the first option, the file upload button you see there that says browse, that's you uploading a digital object directly into Archeion, and that's going to store the file in Archeion and use up a portion of the storage space that you're provided. So as an institutional member, right off the bat, when you set up a profile, you get 1 gigabytes of space. So if you choose to upload digital objects, then you're using up your storage space. So the second option is option 2, and that's the link to an external digital object where you enter a URL. And that's you deciding, no, I don't want to store my digitized records in Archeion, and I want to link out to a URL of a public external digital object. So note that with this option, which is described and linked in the slides to the AtoM documentation, if you're trying to ingest a file into AtoM, then you have to enter a URL that ends with the file extension of the resource that you're trying to link to. So if you're trying to link to an image, the URL has to end in .jpeg or .png. However, if this is kind of the workaround for, I have a lot of digital objects, but I can only add one link in the description, you can actually link out to a website that doesn't end in a .jpeg, and that would take the user to that web page if they click on the digital object. But if you choose that option, you have to go back and upload a thumbnail for that option. So that is just one of the workarounds for this issue with AtoM, where you can only add one digital object per description. You can link out to a page or a directory of files where people can find more. So there's an example in the slides. I think it's Laurentian who do that, and it's kind of a creative way to lead users from the description to all the digitized records. You just have to upload the thumbnail manually if you do that. Yeah, so linking to external digital objects is, in my mind, the better option for your institution if you already have digital object storage, because the linking doesn't use up any of your free institutional 1 gigabytes of space, and for other reasons that we'll talk about later. So again, you get 1 gigabyte of free space. If you need more free space, we do have something called the Archeion Extra Storage Policy, and your institution can purchase that, and then you get an additional invoice on top of your membership fee that is billed to you just to cover the storage space that we pay Artifactual Systems, who are our hosts for Archeion. So we pay them for storage, and that just helps offset the cost of how much storage we're paying for. So if you need more than 1 gig, which if you're using Archeion to upload digital objects, you most definitely will need more than 1 gig probably, you can just sign up and pay for an extra storage fee annually. So once you've uploaded the digital object, you'll see that you can edit digital object. Again, if you go back to that little more button in the description, and that allows you to do things like edit the digital object's metadata, add alt text for images or subtitles for videos, which is very important for web accessibility. I would also argue that some of the metadata in the description offers screen readers some additional web accessibility features, but that's where you would do that. And then the edit digital object is also where you can go back and change the thumbnail. If you've used a URL that doesn't have a file extension and you need to add an image, that's where you do that. And I linked to the documentation that explains that a bit more in the AtoM documentation too. So you can also upload PDFs to Archeion, but there's some things to consider if you're working with like PDFs of minutes or other digitized records that are in PDF format. The PDF text will be searchable through the description search as long as the PDF has a text layer. So you have to be uploading PDF that's been OCR'd. And then the other consideration, if it's a huge PDF with lots and lots of pages, AtoM has a limit to how far it indexes. So I've linked in the slide of the 2.8 recommendation for the limit of how far a PDF will be indexed. So there's the artifactual systems documentation says between 1.5 to 2.8 million words, depending on the language and words used. So if you have a PDF that's more than 2.8 million words, then AtoM is actually going to stop indexing it so that the rest of the text in the PDF won't be searchable. But if you do upload smaller PDFs, the text actually, folks can log in and search for it. And there's an example in the slides for one of the PDFs. And then if you search a little phrase from the PDF, it actually pops up the description with that digital object. So there's lots of different contexts for how you want to use digital object upload and linking in Archeion. So this is something that is, again, context specific. So if you have a specific context, reach out to the Archeion Coordinator and you can get help with your specific use case. And we've talked in some of the past sessions about Archeion being part of the researcher pathway and not necessarily the final destination for the research. So for finding digitized records, my recommendation is just think of things that will make the path easier for them. If you have a digitized collection, taking 2 minutes to add, a linked digital object to the top level collection, and then adding an access of other copies to the description page, or adding a link to the digital collection page for your institution on your institutional profile page is just a really great way to connect users to your descriptions. So as a concrete example of having lots of digitized content in different places, a good example is Ontario, which is a database service from Our Digital World that uses the Vita Toolkit platform. Does anyone here use Ontario? I don't know each of your institutions off the bat. Thumbs up if you use Ontario. No? Okay, that's okay. But there is a lot of overlap. The left screenshot here is a list of their institutions, and there's a lot of overlap between their institutions and Archeion institutions. So I just think it would be a really wonderful initiative to better connect all the amazing digitized records that are in our Ontario with the corresponding Archeion descriptions that users have, so that we're kind of building a bridge between, hey, here's all the digitized records over here, and then here's the archival finding aid that has all the context and rich name access points and different information that corresponds to that digitized record in Archeion. So this is an example of doing exactly that I spoke with the Oxford County Archives. They use our Ontario. I spoke with them earlier this summer, and it's just an example of what can be done. So they had an existing description for this phone in Archeion, and then I noticed some of the records from the phone had been digitized in our Ontario. So all I did, it took maybe 2 minutes, is take the URL of the image and then did the process of linking the digital object. So going to more, go to link digital object, plug in the URL for the image, and then it pulls in the image, stores a thumbnail. A user can click on the image to get to the Ontario version of it, but there's also a notes field pointing to the Our Ontario link for all of their digital records as well. So that's kind of what I mean by building a bridge for users to find digitized records from a phone description that could be available in other places. And it's a really low effort, efficient way to connect users and has a lot of discovery benefits. If you've invested in digitizing the records, then placing a pointer by uploading or linking a digital object to the description is a great way to lead users to what you've invested in digitizing. So this is just talking a little bit about the digital object browse page. So for example, that phone from Oxford County, it wasn't previously surfacing in the browse page, but because I added that single digital object, now it's appearing along with other phone to say, hey, this phone has some digitized records to it, so check out the description. So this page, though, you may notice that sometimes as you're going through the Browse Digital Object page, you'll see finding aids appearing. So please do not add finding aids uploaded as digital objects into the database. It can be confusing for users because the word digital object itself isn't very clear. A lot of users are confused about digital objects, confused about how much is digitized from institutions. So I think if we're combining finding aids and digital objects and then labeling it as digital objects, it's just adding to the confusion. Plus, from a database perspective, these two things are separate, right? So we don't want to be telling the database, hey, this finding aid is a digital object. It's not, it's sort of a separate data model than the digital objects and a separate purpose in the database. I will say many of these PDFs are legacy finding aids from before AtoM had the functionality to upload finding aids as a separate process from uploading digital objects. So this happens with technology, a workflow has changed, but now we want to start using the upload finding aid or generate finding aid process, which we'll talk about in a moment, rather than uploading finding aids as a digital object, because then they're appearing in the digital object browse page. So we'll talk about finding aids in a sec, but I did want to mention something about hosting, because I am recommending that people perhaps consider using external hosting rather than uploading directly into Archeion. And sometimes I get asked about this and just recommending hosting options. And, there is some qualifications around recommending hosting options that the AO doesn't endorse the experience or prices of these companies or organizations. And it's obviously the responsibility of an institution to check out any company or organization they hire. But I am mentioning two hosting options today. So the first is Our Digital World, which is specific to Ontario heritage institutions. And they are also well set up for newspaper digitization. So if you have a big newspaper project, I would really recommend reaching out to them. And I will explain what IIIF is in a moment. They're not yet IIIF compliant, but they're looking into IIIF functionality, so publishing their records as IIIF compliant digital objects. And then the Internet Archive is a second one. And I know recently they had a security issue. Our Digital World did as well. I don't see these things as bad things. Security is an issue for all technology companies right now. And in my mind, once they've gone through it, they are probably more secure and better able to respond to security issues against future attacks after having gone through them. So they're having two security issues with these two hosting companies, but I would still recommend them. And I'd especially recommend the Internet Archive because I think using a large and shared infrastructure hosting company can come with less risk compared to smaller companies or putting your digital assets with a corporation. Some people put their stuff on Flickr or Google Drive. You do what you have to do and what works for your institution. But again, those folks are not necessarily set up for maintaining long-term heritage content. So it's just, yeah, I would recommend exploring these two as a starting point. And I would also really recommend, especially for smaller institutions, even larger ones, try to use shared infrastructure for hosting digital objects. Anytime you create your own system, you're just accruing more and more technical debt. And if you build your own database, you just have to make sure that you can maintain it long-term and your institution is committed long-term. So these are some options that are externally hosted, which comes with additional considerations around the long-term sustainability of the digital object and the platforms you're using. But just shared infrastructure reduces your technical debt. And I've linked to some slides from a 2023 AO conference presentation where I talk about this a bit more. I also put this slide up without qualifying what IIIF is. So I think some of you know and have heard me talk about this, but for those who haven't, for any AV or image digitized records, we as a community, an archives community, really need to start considering publishing images as data. So what I mean by that is considering the International Image Interoperability Framework, or IIIF, and that's a standard which publishes images in a standardized way that can be consumed by tools and the web in a way that is machine actionable. So the Internet Archive is IIIF compliant, and our Digital World, I believe, are working on it. But if we're not publishing our images in a standardized way as data, we're kind of running into the old issues that we've talked about with batch ingesting description data instead of uploading a PDF. Where the PDF is flat, it's not structured, we can't do anything with that data. But publishing images or AV materials as IIIF, it structures the data in a way that we can do stuff in the future, and will make us a bit more future forward ready than if you were just, sticking a JPEG in Google Drive. We do what we can. Putting JPEGs in Google Drive is fine for access, but you just want to start considering adding IIIF to your list of functional requirements when you are pursuing a digitization project or looking at digital object hosting. And happy to answer questions about IIIF too. The other thing to note is that AtoM is not IIIF compliant, and I don't know if AtoM version 2 will be in the future. So that's another reason why I would recommend considering other hosting options rather than uploading your images and AV materials to Archeion, because we don't offer IIIF delivery of those digitized objects. So that's it for digital objects. We're going to move on to the finding aid section. And today we're going to have a little less time for conversation, but here we go. So you've added a top level description to Archeion. Say you also want to upload a finding aid to that description. So there's different ways you can do that. For one, you don't actually have to upload or generate anything. You can just put a link. If you have an externally hosted finding aid, you can put a link to that in the notes area. So this example is showing where the Archives of Ontario has done that per description to their locally hosted database, which used to be Manisis and then changed. And I use them as an example, not to throw them under the bus. I love Archives of Ontario, but all of the links that were added as finding aids from their top level descriptions actually broke when they migrated recently off of Manisis. So if you choose to add finding aids in this way, where you're adding a note to an external database, just make sure that you're adding links that your institution is sure that it can maintain in the long term, because if these links break, you really need to be updating them, or you can send the Archeion Coordinator a spreadsheet to update them as well. If the links break, it really impacts Archeion's search engine optimization, so we don't want to have broken links to external finding aids in the system. It's not great. So I've been fixing these as I can, but there's quite a lot. So if you're choosing to do this, just make sure you're entering a link that you think you can maintain. So that's the first option. The two other options are linking to finding aids. The two other options for attaching finding aids to a description in Archeion is first the generate finding aid button and then upload a finding aid feature. So something to note about uploading a finding aid is that you can only generate or upload one finding aid per archival unit. So if you have a series that has a PDF and you want to upload that, and then another series has a PDF and you want to upload that as a finding aid, you can't do that. There's only one finding aid for the entire descriptive unit, which is why some people use the digital object upload to get around that. let's try not to use that though as a workaround, because it messes with the digital object browse page, which is what we saw previously. So it means if you do have multiple PDFs for a description unit, you can also merge them and make one PDF and upload that as well. Or talk to me about the context and we can figure out a solution. So finding aids can be generated from any published description. This is again all described in the AtoM documentation, but we'll just cover it really quickly within the Archeion context. So you have to be logged in to see the generate button if you want to generate a finding aid from the descriptions in Archeion. But if you use Archeion only for top level full or collections, the generate button will not be useful to you because it's only generating information from the data that you've put into Archeion. So if you have entered all levels of description into Archeion, then you can generate a finding aid, and that's because Archeion stores this data as encoded archival description XML or EAD, and the generate button actually uses that EAD XML of the description data that you've entered into Archeion to transform the data into a PDF finding aid via this thing called an XSLT. So when you put the data into Archeion, it becomes structured, and one of the machine actionable things that you can do with it is generate a nicely styled PDF. So this example is from Redeemer University, which again has multiple levels of description. And if they chose to use the generate button, it would generate an archival description and also a full file list of everything that they've entered. The other thing to note is that the generate option won't be an option unless it's published, at least at the time of writing these slides. I don't know if that will change in future AtoM versions. Yeah, so that is how the generate button works. So once you click on the generate button, you'll get a little message that says status in progress, and then you can kind of refresh the page until a download button appears, and that means that the finding aid has been generated. If the description has hundreds of child records, it may take some time for the system to generate the PDF. And then you can just click the download button and view the finding aid that's being produced by AtoM through the description data in the database. One important thing to note, this is something we've been working on in my role with U of T, is that the XSLT that AtoM uses, it doesn't generate a structured PDF with tags that are friendly for screen readers. So the PDF generated from the AtoM description, it's not great for screen readers, but if you have users who require assistive technology to navigate the web, then just refer them to the data in Archeion, because the PDF that's generated is from that data, and the data in Archeion is more web accessible than the resulting PDF. You can also delete the PDF after it's been created. If you are updating the description and you want to regenerate, then you can click delete, wait a bit of time for the system to refresh, and then you can generate it again. Again, it may take some time if you have hundreds and hundreds of lower level child descriptions. So just remember, you have to be logged in to create a finding aid. The description has to be published, and then once it's published, once you've generated the published finding aid, anyone can see it and download it. If the generated finding aid has been deleted, you can create a new one at any time. It just might be kind of slow if there's lots and lots of children records. And all published levels of the description in Archeion will be included in the generated finding aid and not draft levels. At least that's how it should be. So that's generating if you put the data into Archeion, but you can also upload a PDF of finding aid. And so here's sort of where your context matters and your workflows matter, right? Like some people just like working in Word and making a PDF. They don't want to put that data into Archeion. That would not be my recommended workflow, but I know that's what works for some people. And so in that context, you would be uploading a PDF. The only thing with uploading a PDF is that we don't have that data in Archeion as an alternate web accessible copy. So we really do need people to be considering that they're uploading a web accessible PDF. And if you need support around web accessible PDFs, email me. I will qualify that I will try to encourage you to put the data into Archeion instead of publishing only a PDF, but we can chat about that. And in the slides, I've also linked to AO Conversation Series around AODA in 2020, and that has some resources from colleagues at U of T who have discussed creating electronic documents via Word and how to save them as PDFs so that they're screen reader friendly. The most important thing to remember is if you're making finding aids that you're publishing as PDFs and uploading them into Archeion, just never print to PDF, because the print to PDF sort of strips all the structure from the Word document, and the resulting PDF is just like a flat image, which is not good. And then this quickly goes over the steps that are better outlined in the AtoM documentation, that you would go to the finding aid and click upload, and then it can take a bit of time. You'll see an in progress message until it's fully uploaded. And then again, you can delete it if you don't like it and you need to change something, that's possible. And for uploading, again, you have to be logged in. And once it's published, anyone could see it, except if the description is in draft, then only you can see it. And you can delete it anytime. There's also something, I don't know if this has changed in recent AtoM versions, but apparently an uploaded PDF has to be under 100 megs in size to be able to upload. And if it is larger, the system might take some time to be uploading it. And then we've talked a bit about search engine optimization over the past few conversations. If you're uploading PDF finding aid data, it's not going to enhance your descriptions surfacing in search engines, because again, you're not getting the URL with the file title or other things in your metadata to be searched and indexed in things like Google. So it's a way to provide access, but it's not structured data, and it doesn't really benefit you in terms of increasing visibility in search engines. So I could say a lot more about that, but I won't, because we have 20 minutes. But yeah, that's the basics of digital objects and finding aids and some of the things that I recommend. And I was just talking to Teresa at the start of this. All of Archeion's functionality is kind of nuanced in how you want to use it. So just email and ask, or we can talk amongst each other for sort of best options for using these two features, because I think we all have different use cases, but if we had more common practices around them, I think it would help our users and also help our community in managing data. So yeah, we can have a period of discussion, and we'll go into the Miro board again, or just come off camera and we can chat, and we'll stop the recording.